It's much easier to prevent cancer than it is to try and reverse it once it's already there. But out of all the medical conditions you could face, cancer is probably the most frightening of them all. The prognosis usually isn't great, and the treatments are incredibly invasive and difficult. It's a great struggle. So today we're going to go and focus on prevention. Although if you're currently dealing with it, there are still steps you can take, and I'll make sure to include some helpful links. So we've all heard that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I'm going to share with you some very good knowledge today that will significantly reduce your cancer risk almost to nothing. So first, let's look at what actually causes cancer. It starts with damage to your mitochondria. When this happens, a normal cell ends up converting into a cancer cell. And it isn't like an infection or a virus invading from the outside. Instead, it's a situation where your own cells are damaged and your body converts them into cancer cells as a survival mechanism. So it originates from your own healthy cells, and these newer cells are prehistoric and very crude actually. They actually lose their mortality, but this means that they can live forever. So the metabolism of a cancer cell is totally different from a normal one as well. It consumes sugar at a much higher rate. And another interesting thing is that cancer tends to spread into areas of inflammation. It can become malignant and move into spots where you've had trauma or a mechanical injury. Or for instance, if someone smokes and has chronic lung inflammation, it can spread there. Or if there's chronic inflammation in the gut from a poor diet, the cancer can spread to that area as well. It's really important to understand that anything that can damage your mitochondria has that big potential to lead to cancer. And there are also plenty of things out there that get the wrong level of attention. So it's valuable to figure out what's actually a major concern versus what isn't as important when you're trying to prevent this. Most people already know that smoking usually causes lung cancer. But it's interesting to note that it can also cause cancer in your pancreas. And when it does, this is actually the leading cause of pancreatic cancer. So this is pretty interesting because you'd think it would only affect the lungs, but it hits the pancreas too. Then there's chronic alcoholism, which most of us know cause cancer, or at least some kind of liver disease, right? And people also talk about obesity being a big risk factor. But you have to ask, is the obesity itself causing these problems? Like with diabetes too, is there something inherently wrong about being obese or fat that's causing the diabetes, or is it the diet that led to it? Is it if you're eating 6 meals a day and snacking constantly, that combination of frequent eating and high carbs is what's increasing the risk? Because in reality, what's happening is you're producing the insulin resistance, which finally now we're starting to realize. I mean, we've known this for a while, but that's really the problem with diabetes, for example, or at least type 2 diabetes, is that insulin resistance. And a lot of things cause that, not just sugar or carbs. But that means you don't have to be, that's why skinny people and slim people can also have this problem, because it's not necessarily being fat, it's insulin resistance. So same with cancer too. It doesn't necessarily, being obese doesn't really cause cancer. It's the factors that led to the obesity, especially having too much insulin, as I mentioned. When your insulin levels stay high, your cancer risk is significantly increases. So it's crucial to know what it usually comes down to, at least in regards to insulin. This is from carbohydrates, sugar, eating too often, and certainly coffee. Nowadays, we're becoming more aware of the detriments of caffeine. And caffeine will give you insulin resistance very quickly. It's a very powerful drug, and that's why the regulations have gone from 4 to 3 cups recommended by, I don't know if it was a government regulation, but doctors used to recommend a safe dose is like no more than 3 cups, but now it's 2 cups, right? It's really, that is maximum. It's a powerful drug. But in contrary, what about things like fasting? What about intermittent fasting? How does that affect cancer? Does it just prevent it, or does it do anything more than that? Well, in fact, it does quite a lot. It's likely the most critical thing you can do if you're facing a cancer diagnosis. And I know of a couple cases where people have had stage 4 terminal cancer, and both of them used fasting and ended up in complete remission. And the doctors were just astounded by this. And there is an interview with one of them, and I'll try to link that below. So it's honestly incredible to go from stage 4 to having no signs of cancer at all. So the key is really prolonged fasting. Since neither of those people were smokers or drinkers, it really makes you wonder what caused their cancer in the first place. So we're going to get into a few things here. If you look into how to lower your cancer risk right now, you'll probably see claims that saturated fat causes cancer or is at least linked to it. And because of that, they recommend swapping that out for saturated fats or unsaturated ones. Or sorry, replacing your saturated fats for unsaturated fats. And really, this is just very bad advice, because I'm going to include all the research below so you can check these studies out for yourself. The problem is that the studies they did on fat are mostly based on questionnaires, which are really poor, in this case, of poor quality and pretty inconclusive when it comes to proving saturated fat alone is increasing your risk. There are just far too many variables involved in these types of surveys. So when it comes to unsaturated fats, you have omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-3s are great because they're anti-inflammatory, which helps lower inflammation. And this can dramatically reduce your cancer risk right there. But then you have omega-6s like corn and soy and cottonseed oils. These are the unsaturated fats people are telling you to eat instead of saturated fats. But these, in fact, have direct links to increased inflammation. And there's also some very strong data showing that when you heat these oils up, like frying or deep frying, which is even worse, far worse, it significantly raises your risk for cancer. As for monounsaturated fats like avocado or olive oil, those actually show some good anti-cancer effects, and they're quite safe. And personally, I haven't seen any reliable data that shows any real link between saturated fats and the increased risk of cancer. Now, what about trans fats? In fact, what we've discovered just over a decade or so ago, maybe longer, is that it's crucial to have the right balance between omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And basically the problem is people just don't get enough omega-3s. They only have omega-6s and other kinds of fats. But as soon as you get enough omega-3, and it doesn't take very much, all of a sudden your risk for cancer that's caused by that imbalance, or that's promoted by that imbalance of fats, is significantly reduced, because we have way too much omega-6, and then we combine that with just having very crappy, low quality fats, rancid oils, right, from the cheap oils and the processed foods and all of our mostly processed foods, right, and fast food, the canola oils and palm oil and stuff like that. And it has the omega-6s, but usually not omega-3s. And that imbalance is really detrimental. So just balancing omega-3s and omega-6 sounds complicated, but really it just means get enough omega-3s because you already have the omega-6s probably. Yes, there are some major links between trans fats and cancer risk. To put it simply, the more refined or chemically processed something is, like those vegetable oils where they use they use chemicals and high heat and pressure, the more it's going to increase that risk because there's degradation and free radicals and things like that. So let's shift over to another topic that ties into this: red meat and processed meat. They usually lump these two together and claim that they both raise your cancer risk. But we've really got to differentiate them because, after all, there's also plenty of white processed meat out there, not just red meat. And you also have to consider that almost all these studies are based on questionnaires. Did they actually look at the quality of the meat? Did they test grass-fed, finished beef? They didn't. Did they separate people who ate red meat by itself from those who eat it with carbs like French fries? Or did they distinguish between a burger from fast food joint to a steak from a farm? And no, the answer is no again. They didn't do these things. So processed meat is packed with chemicals and goes through an immense amount of refining and additives. It's pretty obvious that if you're getting your red meat from a fast food restaurant, it's going to be very processed and refined. And if it's an Italian deli, even worse, because it's deli meat, it's cured meat. So this ties directly into processed foods, since refined or ultra-processed items are in the same category as processed meats and refined carbs and chemicals. It's that combination of protein or fat with sugar at high temperatures, like you see with French fries or chips. Even if you have a bit of whole wheat flour in there, it's often so heavily processed that you can't really claim that those whole grains are helping to prevent cancer. So when you see a study claiming whole wheat reduces your risk, you have to look at the big picture and actually read the details. I've never even heard of someone just eating plain whole grains. They're usually eating them along with many other things. So the real issue is that when you take processed foods, especially refined grains, and add high heat and specific vegetable oils, you end up with acrylamide. Acrylamide is a known carcinogen. And without making it too complicated, the goal is to avoid refined and processed foods and focus on the quality of the whole foods we're eating. And this leads to the next topic, which is fiber. You'll hear all the time that increasing your fiber will lower your cancer risk, but they're lumping everything kind of together with the natural fiber found in vegetables. But what about the new synthetic functional fibers like resistant maltodextrin, or tapioca fiber, or corn fiber? These are brand new and haven't really stood the test of time in safety studies, so we don't truly know about them yet. They might not spike your blood sugar, but I found some interesting data to share. Because according to a study from Georgia State University and the University of Toledo, adding highly refined fiber to processed foods could have all sorts of detrimental health effects, like liver cancer. So more research is definitely needed to figure out which parts of gut fermentation are helpful and which aren't. But they've actually found a significant number of mice in that study which developed liver cancer. Now you could say mice aren't humans, but there haven't been any real safety studies on people yet. But putting these functional fibers into everything, including those keto-friendly snacks and bars, is just too premature. It's a highly processed food, right? That's the thing we have to be careful of. And sure, they might not, have a dramatic effect on your blood sugar, but What are they doing to your gut microbiome? But to keep it simple, you want to get your fiber from real food, real whole food, not synthetic fibers in processed foods, or perhaps even the synthetic fibers that that are just the mixed drinks that you can get. Now that we're on the topic of synthetics, I should mention antioxidants. This is very important. You've probably heard some conflicting information over the past few years saying that antioxidant supplements can actually cause cancer. And hold on a second though, because they were advertised to prevent it too, right? So what you might not know is that the studies they're basing this on use synthetic antioxidants, not the kind that you get from real food again. Like beta carotene, for example, it's a carotenoid and a fat-soluble antioxidant with a lot of good benefits. But it's being added to our food in infant formula as vitamin A, and it's even used in color farm raised salmon, so it isn't gray. It's even used in commercial eggs to make those egg yolks look nice and bright. But you might think it's just beta carotene, it's an antioxidant, so what's the big deal? But if you really dive into how they make this synthetic beta carotene, it's pretty gnarly and bizarre. They use all kinds of chemicals like acetone and solvents like hexane just to create this coloring agent. So there's a massive difference between a synthetic version and the natural one. They just aren't the same thing. The real problem is that there are links to an increased risk of cancer here. I'm bringing this up because we're talking about lowering your risk, right? If you might think of all the antioxidants as good, well, it's only the ones that come from nature. So to keep it simple, you have to stick to real food, stay away from synthetic food, or rather versions of things, and processed foods, of course. Get your antioxidants from your vegetables and fruit too, like pomegranates and things like that. And now we're talking about antioxidants. I should mention probably the most powerful one of all, which is melatonin. This definitely lowers your risk of getting cancer. And most people know melatonin as a sleep hormone. They don't hear anything about this. This mentioning of an antioxidant that prevents cancer. But it also has another job inside all of your cells where it acts as an antioxidant. So the way you actually boost your melatonin is by getting exposed to infrared light. And when you're out in the sun, you're getting an enormous amount of infrared, as well as the ultraviolet, of course. But the infrared can actually penetrate through your clothes and go about a couple inches into your body. And all that infrared recharges and increases your melatonin levels. And this might be a bit confusing because we've always been told to stay out of the sun since it's bad, it's harsh, the radiation's so harsh. And it increases cancer risk, like skin cancer. But that's another topic that's been totally diluted, distorted with a lot of misinformation. So I'm going to clear that up here, because when you're in the sun, you're getting UV light, specifically UVB, which helps your body produce vitamin D. Another important factor in lowering your cancer risk. On top of that, that light triggers your melanocytes, or I guess it's called melanocytes, which are the cells that make melanin. And melanin basically acts like an umbrella or a natural sunscreen that protects you from harmful radiation. So the key is to make sure you don't let yourself get completely burned or spend too much time at the very least. You can expose yourself just enough light to get a tan without burning. If you gradually increase your time in the sun, you can actually lower the risk from that UV radiation. And again, there are some really interesting studies that I'll link below showing that showing that being in the sun can decrease the risk of cancers, especially prostate cancer, believe it or not. Well, the credible studies claiming the sun causes melanoma are actually based on very weak associations. So we really don't have to go by that. The truth is, a healthy amount of sun exposure can actually help lower your risk for cancer and many other chronic conditions. Thanks to both the vitamin D, the natural vitamin D your body's able to produce, and the melatonin that you're able to produce as well. There are also the antioxidants found in cruciferous vegetables, and eating just 3 servings of these vegetables every week can actually lower the risk of many different cancers, but by up to 40%. So that's really amazing. Then there's exercise, and exercise is just a fantastic way to prevent almost every problem, every kind of physical disease or illness out there. And it doesn't take a lot. All you need to have a strong immune system and to lower your risk of cancer or reduce it almost to zero when you combine that with the antioxidants and a good diet is just having, about 20 minutes of exercise a day, just a straight 20 minutes of cardio, of having that BPM at a high rate, or doing something really intense for a straight 15 or 20 minutes. It's all you need, right? And in between that, if you can do some other things, lighter exercise like walking, or things like hiking, which take longer than just 20 minutes. But being able to do something intense where your body has to work really hard and your heart rate has to go up, your heart has to beat really fast for, 15 minutes is a long time. 20 minutes is a long time. It's all you need. If you do that every day, that's excellent for your heart, for your health, your immune system, everything. Another important practice related to inflammation is having a lifestyle that minimizes oxidation or oxidative stress. So being stressed in general has probably a bigger impact than you realize on this kind of thing, on cancer risk, right? Being stressed out is very unhealthy because you're pumping your body with adrenaline and cortisol, just like when you drink too much caffeine. Same problem, creates insulin resistance, inflammation. And another habit that we have, a lifestyle habit that needs to stay in check and regulated, is our sex life. Because especially the scientists who are very into longevity, they've discovered that when you have an orgasm, this produces a lot of oxidative stress, because you're telling your body to basically enjoy life. The going is good. You don't need to survive because you seem to be performing an activity that doesn't require survival. It's an activity of abundance, right? So that makes the body complacent, and this oxidative stress is very detrimental because that causes more inflammation. So this has a really big effect because, in the studies of Gnosis, we know that energy doesn't just come from food or air or water. It comes from the ether, right? It comes from higher dimensions. And there's obviously a certain amount of energy that gets used up, but that's required to maintain our potency, our vitality. And it gets used up when we have the orgasm, when we procreate. It creates otherwise it wouldn't create that oxidative stress. So, spiritually speaking, if you're maintaining a sex life, at least you should keep that in check. Consider regulating it, right? You shouldn't be having an orgasm all the time. once a week at the most for somebody who's still active, and then work towards renouncing that gradually